The Materium, also called real space, is the four-dimensional region of space-time where corporeal beings live. It is the physical plane of existence defined by the four basic forms of physical energy and the basic elements of matter, as opposed to the immaterium, more often called the warp or warp space, the hyperdimensional, non-Euclidean, psychically reactive region of space-time that underlies the physical universe. The warp is both a mirror of real space, while at the same time permeating all of it, as if it were an invisible, undetectable mist. The Materium abides by all the laws of physics and the natural world that we know today. The warp, on the other hand, is another dimension where demons and other warp entities like enslavers and psychonian exist, created and maintained by the collective psychic unconsciousness of the sentient beings of the material universe, particularly mankind, since humanity is the galaxy's most populous and dominant intelligent species in the late 41st millennium. These warp entities lust to cross over into the Materium, to create havoc and consume the souls of mortals. Travel through the Materium is relatively slow, and the greatest achievable speed is that of the speed of light in a vacuum. Therefore, many intelligent, star-faring species choose to travel through the warp using warp drives or similar technologies like the Eldar Webway. Because of the non-Euclidean nature of warp space, it is possible for a starship to travel dozens or even hundreds of light years across real space in a short period of relative time, while moving only a fraction of that distance in the warp. Certain regions within the Milky Way galaxy exist where the warp and the Materium essentially bleed into one another due to the enormous trauma to the underlying boundaries of space-time, creating the permanent warp storms known as warp rifts. The most infamous of these rifts are the Eye of Terror in the Segmentum Obscurus and the Maelstrom in the Ultima Segmentum in the Galactic East. Since the birth of the Great Rift in 999 M41, the veil between the Materium and the warp has grown progressively more strained, allowing warp entities to make their way into real space with much greater ease. In some places with heavy influence from the inhabitants of the warp, such as the Scourge stars controlled by the servants of the plague god Nurgle, the environments of the Materium and Immaterium have begun to merge, much as they long have within warp rifts like the Eye of Terror and the Maelstrom. It is likely that unless the waxing power of chaos can be contained, that the outbreaks of warp activity into real space will only become worse, ultimately threatening the very nature of reality itself.